Getting situated. Okay, so we're streaming live on YouTube. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's technical briefing about the permanent CTS site that will be launching next week. I'm Julie Cobflesh from Public Health, and today I'm going to be your moderator. We want to welcome all of our elected officials, key stakeholders, and our panelists who are here today to celebrate this milestone in the community, which is truly bringing a vital health service to Kitchener and to our community. We have a number of presentations today planned. We're going to get to those in short order. And I just wanted to remind people to maybe mute your mics while we're doing presentations. There will be an opportunity at the end for you to ask questions. I also want to note that we are streaming live on YouTube and that this session will be recorded and posted on the Region of Waterloo YouTube channel for people to view later. Our media partners are here today as well, so I want to welcome them, and we will provide time at the end for our media partners to be able to ask questions. And again, apologies, we had some technical issues this morning, and I appreciate everyone's becoming Zoom ninjas and able to kind of respond and react to these types of situations quickly, so we appreciate it and we apologize. I'm going to now turn it over to our first presentation. We're going to hear first with an overview and a welcome from Dr. Shuli Wong and Dr. Chris Steingart. So I will pull up the slides for you, and Shuli, I think that you're up first.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So it is with great pride that we bring you all together today to celebrate the opening of the permanent consumption and treatment services site located at 150 Duke Street West in Kitchener. This service represents one piece of a larger harm reduction and opioid strategy to reduce fatal overdoses in Waterloo Region. The opioid crisis continues to be one of the most important public health concerns across Canada, across Ontario, and in Waterloo Region. Up to yesterday, 68 people in our community lost their lives to suspected opioid overdose, surpassing the total number of deaths in 2019. Opioid overdoses continue to happen because of the unpredictability of the illicit drug supply, often containing fentanyl, and because of the stigma and shame associated with addiction and how that influences a person's decision to use alone. I thought I would start this meeting by sharing some highlights of the journey that led to this important service being established in our region. Following that, I will pass it over to Dr. Chris Steingart of Sanguine Health Center to speak about the involvement of his organization in this partnership, and as the operators of the site to discuss the service model. Regarding the journey, the work began in June 2017 when members of the Waterloo Region Integrated Drug Strategy recommended that supervised consumption services be considered to address the rising number of opioid overdoses in Waterloo Region. Following endorsement from Regional Council, public health staff completed a feasibility study to understand the need for these services. In February 2018, Regional Council reviewed the findings of the study, which identified significant need for these services and endorsed a recommendation to hold special meetings to seek public input. Following the meetings, Regional Council endorsed the recommendation to move forward. Later in 2018, work to identify possible locations was completed, and together, community stakeholders created a Made in Waterloo Region model for the site. The model included a range of services that people may need in addition to supervised consumption, and described a facility that is welcoming to program participants and contributes to the surrounding community in a positive way. In 2019, approval of 150 Duke Street West was received by City of Kitchener Council and Regional Council, and work began to open an interim site while funding for the permanent site was confirmed, and the design and construction of the permanent site was completed. The interim site opened on October the 15th, 2019. Almost 1 year later to the day, we are extremely pleased to announce that the permanent site will open on October the 14th, 2020. Before I ask Chris to speak, I'd like to take a moment to recognize our community. This work represents a collective effort from many organizations, community members, and stakeholders from across the region. To all of those people who are involved at every step along the way, I thank you for your dedication and for making our community a more caring and equitable place to live. I would especially like to thank the staff and volunteers of Sanguine Health Centre who stepped up very early in the planning process as the agency interested in operating this site, and who continue to put the people who use these services at the center of what they do. Finally, thank you to our partners at the City of Kitchener who have dedicated staff time and organizational support to ensure this site is successful. We are very thankful for your partnership. And now I'll pass it over to Dr. Steingart to say a few words from the perspective of Sanguine Health Centre. Thank you.
Thanks, Shuli, and thanks everyone for joining today. Pretty sure this is the first time I've been live on YouTube, so that's quite an experience. As Shuli went through the long process that has gotten us here, hard to imagine that the most difficult part of this turned out to be getting the Zoom call all up and going. But here we are, and we're just extremely excited that we've reached this point in this long journey. I know I only have a few minutes, which at the best of times is difficult for me. And I'd really like to take a couple hours to go through and thank everybody that was involved with the work that needed to be done to get this this site up and running. But there's just it's an incredible and almost unimaginable amount of work that's gone into this. And it's unfortunate that I don't have the time to thank everybody, and Shuli did a good job of that for me. This is the culmination of a lot of sweat and tears on the part of so many individuals, and I thank all of you, and I try to do my best to do that to you personally at some point as well. It's really difficult to underestimate the significance of this site as it's existed up until now. The temporary site has found its place in the community as a critical, important facility within the community. It's extremely important to the people that work there, and of course, it's most important to those individuals that benefit from the use of that site. On a daily basis, people come to the site with just these raw, complex needs that extend beyond risk of overdose. It's very hard to imagine waking up in the morning not knowing if you're going to be able to get through the day, and to face that risk every day, and to have that risk not be the only complex challenge that you face during that day. And unfortunately, for so many folks that come to the site, a big part of what they have to deal with on an ongoing basis is just a lack of connection to other people, a lack of connection to healthcare and other services, and a lack of connection to the community. And this site has provided some of that connection that people need so dearly, especially during these times. I don't think any of us feel as totally connected as what we did before COVID, and COVID has put a lot of barriers in place for all of us, and the challenges that people people that are living with overdose risk and that they face on a day-to-day basis. Everything has just been made more difficult by this COVID pandemic, and for this site to have been present during the bulk of during this time to provide this connection, I think has been critically important in the community. And now here we are. I mean, it's almost surreal that we're finally at the point where we're opening this permanent site, which for so long just seemed to be so far away, and it's just so exciting that we're here and at the point where this wonderful facility is about to be open. As to the services that are being provided there, the site will continue to be open on a 7-day-a-week basis, 9 in the morning to 9 at night. And you can see the permanent on-site staff that are there on an ongoing basis, a receptionist to greet people, 2 nurses and a peer in the consumption room, support worker and a peer in the post-consumption area, supervisor on site, and security as well. This new site allows us to expand the services that we've been able to provide at the temporary site up until now. And that's, a big part of the excitement that we have about this, because it's obviously about so much more than providing a safer place for people to use toxic, poisonous substances that is the reality for so many. Obviously, supervised consumption, overdose prevention, and reversal is a critical aspect to this. But we all know that supervised consumption isn't the only answer to the opioid crisis, but it remains a critical life-saving part of our response. And we're so happy to be able to expand that response. Like it or not, just about everybody who's using drugs today is not in a position today to stop. And so for those people today, we need to be there, because maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, or in a couple of months, or in a couple of years, there'll be that opportunity for someone to take that next step. But because it's not today for so many people, we need to be there, because we need these people to be alive tomorrow. All right. These are important members of our community. These are our brothers and sisters, our daughters, our sons, our parents, our colleagues, our friends. These are members of the community that deserve what we all want, which just is a chance at safety, a chance at good health, whatever that means to the individual. And that's an important part of what we're able to provide with this facility and the programs and services that we're able to, or going to be able to, deliver to people, in addition to a safer way to use these toxic drugs and to respond when the worst happens. Because otherwise, these are folks that are going to have to do this in a park, or alone in their home, or in a public washroom, or in an alley somewhere, often alone and at such high risk. Whereas this facility gives that opportunity for that safer use and for that tomorrow. But in addition to the supervised consumption and overdose prevention services that are there, we obviously are able to distribute harm reduction materials and supplies that also provide that extra level of safety, help prevent transmission of infections like hepatitis C and HIV and others. But there's now the opportunity to add to these services our wraparound services, to provide things like substitution therapy for those that are at that point where they're ready, or actual addiction treatment services, trauma-informed counseling and mental health care, access to consistent primary care, which is such an important aspect of anyone's health, and a number of other services that we can bring on into this space to provide a bigger menu of services to any one individual at the time to meet those particular needs on that particular day. Things like groups, you know, housing support, employment support, life skills. There's just so many opportunities to bring services into this facility to provide that answer for a member of our community with those needs that are presented on that particular day. And this site doesn't just act in a silo either. This isn't just operating on its own. We have now the real benefit of a number of different organizations coming together in a collaborative fashion to help better provide services both within this site and outside. The Inner City Health Alliance is a group of organizations that have come together to recognize the benefits of better collaboration in delivering services to those that are most disconnected from our services. This alliance of organization, it includes us, it includes Sanguine, the Working Center, the House of Friendship, KDCHC, Ray of Hope, the Center for Family Medicine, and others, providing sort of interagency care and connections, warm referrals. So if we don't have services on site, this connection of agencies allows us to better access services to folks. Again, giving us a better opportunity to meet those needs at any one particular time. Because make no mistake, we've been through some tough times here, okay? Everything that we hear about it, you know, now with respect to healthcare, pretty much is around COVID and the very real difficulties that we've been through and that we're going to go through in the coming weeks to months. But this opioid crisis, this overdose risk has been heightened by COVID. For most, if not all of the folks that are accessing these services, COVID has been nothing more but another barrier getting in the way of access to needed services. And this site and the cooperation, the collaboration among many agencies that are providing services to folks allows us to get through that, and we can evolve as we go through COVID in the context of what has become a new normal, and with a lot of difficulty in trying to predict how things are going to go. We're going to be in a better position to be able to keep people safer and to help people move along whatever their path is to a safer and healthier existence. Okay. So I'll stop there, and with that, I'm going to pass it over to Grace Birmingham to talk about some of the very real benefits that we've seen from this service being available in the community. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Chris. So I have the pleasure of sharing a little bit of the impact that this site has had on our community in the last year. So I'm going to share over the next 3 slides some data on operations. Julie, would you mind moving? There we go, perfect. So over the next 3 slides, I'm going to highlight some of the data on site operations over the last year. So the slide that you see in front of you here contains 2 charts. One that shows the total number of visits to the CTS by month, and one that shows the number of unique visitors to the site by month. And what these 2 charts are showing is that the monthly visits decreased starting in March. This wasn't really a surprise to us, as this was the time that we also saw greater restrictions related to the COVID-19 pandemic and higher numbers of positive cases in our region. And these numbers in terms of visits to the site continue to decrease through the summer. With the second chart, however, interestingly, the number of unique clients remained somewhat consistent during the same period. So this may indicate for us that while people were coming to the site less frequently, they continue to come to the site to access supervised consumption services, pick up harm reduction supplies, including naloxone, or access wraparound services. So I'll just ask you to move on to the next slide, Julie. Great, thank you. Again, a couple of charts on this slide. The first chart relates to the number of overdoses reversed on site. This chart shows some alignment between the number of visits to the site and the number of overdoses reversed between March and June. However, you can see that overdoses started to increase in the summer months, even though visits continue to decline. So, when we see trends like this, we try to ask ourselves, what's going on? What are we seeing? And what we can conclude, or what we think we can conclude here, is that during these months, the illicit drug supply being used by clients was especially toxic. So even though we saw the visits go down, we saw the number of overdoses reversed go up. And then I'll just draw your attention to the second chart on this slide, which relates to the number of needle sweeps and needles picked up by month. So it is a requirement of CTS operations that staff conduct needle sweeps as part of what they do. So staff who conduct those sweeps are looking for discarded needles, and that's indicated by the blue line on the chart. The orange line represents the number of needles found during those sweeps. And as you can see, those numbers do fluctuate month to month. And next slide, please, Julie. Great. So we wanted to take a second and talk about referrals. The CTS, we have always talked about the CTS as being more than just consumption services, and provides an important gateway into other services that people may need. And so I wanted to talk about the thousands of referrals that have been made at this site. And those referrals would be to mental health services, primary care services, and treatment services since the CTS opened. During the interim site, Dr. Steingart had spoken about there being somewhat minimal space for wraparound services. However, it's important to note that even though we had we were more restricted in terms of space, Sanguine was able to bring on site mental health supports and some primary care in response to what was being seen. Consistently, the highest number of on-site and off-site referrals relate to the mental health of the clients, followed by primary care. Referral to treatment continues to be available for those who are ready, and this includes providing connections to the Rapid Access Addiction Treatment, or the RACs, addiction counseling, and withdrawal management. So before I pass it over to our next speaker, I wanted to draw your attention to the Region of Waterloo website, or public health website, where you can find up-to-date information on the CTS, including a total number and monthly breakdowns of visits and overdose data. This is a snapshot of what you can see on that site. And I would encourage all of you to, if you're interested, to go to our website, do take a look at the dashboard. And if you are interested in getting updates, you can subscribe to that page and receive automatic updates. So I'll now invite Elena to speak from her experience as a nurse at the site and what this service has meant for her clients and our community. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Elena. I'm one of the nurses at the CTS. I feel as though when we think about the work we do at the CTS, the most obvious conclusion is overdose reversal, that we stop people from dying. I'm here to explain to you how beyond that, we act as a catalyst to help folks live. The community we serve is often targeted, sometimes in dehumanizing ways, by people who don't understand, whether intentional or not. At the CTS, however, we meet people where they're at in their journey and assist in whichever way we can, however we can, even if it's just a drink of water. At the CTS, people are met with no judgment, no stigma, just compassion. When we first opened, folks showed up for a safe place to use, a place not to die, or even a place just to get gear, maybe some Narcan. This led to comfort and open conversations about substance use, where there was a vast amount of learning happening both ways. Sorry, I'm getting emotional because it makes me so happy. So this paved the way for relationships we've all established and for trust to be built. I just want to focus on that simply listening and validating and hearing the information people were providing to us made such a strong impact. Not only did our team gain a stronger understanding of the worlds our client lived in, but the clients felt heard and respected. The simple act of hearing what folks were saying, whether this was about substance use, housing, their experiences with recovery, or even accessing services, gave people a reason to feel valued. I remember the first time this really hit me. I had a client who I'd met multiple times, came into the site and was talking about their own struggles in life and how difficult it was for them to ever trust anybody. They then stopped what they were doing, turned around and looked at me and said, "I've literally trusted you guys with my life." As the relationships we've built grew stronger, we heard more about the struggles people have had, and we've taken the time to genuinely hear them, with no other intent or motive than simply being a support. At the CTS, we help bring back that humanity factor. We accept and embrace each and every person that walks through that door, regardless of everything else. We believe that every person deserves respect and dignity, and we'll work with each person to help meet their needs to the best of our abilities. Because we have such a diverse team, we've been able to pull together our connections and bring the most relevant information forward to give folks the best opportunities. There's no rush or judgment when we have these conversations, and that's felt wholeheartedly in the site. It simply feels safe. The struggle really hit our community with the COVID pandemic. So services were shut down and restricted and changing consistently, and we were a part of that. More barriers were put up and our community felt that hit. We lost some amazing people, and that pain still lingers. The CTS is a safe place, a trusted place where clients can come and feel that those deaths mattered, that they're more than a statistic, and that they'll be missed. It's a place that clients feel comfortable enough to come in their worst moods and vent without fear of judgment or repercussions. It's a place where people can disclose their biggest insecurities and fears, and we can work on it together, or just listen, depending on what the client wants. It's a place where folks feel safety, regardless of which staff are on, because we have the most amazing team. I remember when I was a nursing student with public health, I was invited to a visionary meeting for the CTS. Through this entire meeting, I just kept thinking about what a beautiful and magical place this region could create. And I just want to say that what the CTS is now is far more magical than anything I could have ever imagined. And this is only going to get better with the opening of the permanent site. I do want to send a special thanks out to Violet for all the work you do. We all appreciate you so much. And I want to send a big shout out to our clients, who are some of the most amazing people I've ever met, and whose feedback has made the CTS what it is and made our team so much stronger. You are valued and you are loved. That's it. I'm good.
Thank you so much, Elena. That was wonderful, and what a great opportunity for us to hear what's going on in the site, and it's everything that we were hoping to hear. So thank you for the work that you do as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for a second. So our next presenter is someone you may know, Chief Brian Larkin from Waterloo Region Police Services is going to provide us with an update about safety and security around the site in particular. So Chief, I'm not sure if you wanted to share slides or if you're just going to talk to us.
Thanks so much, Julie. I'm going to forgo any slides. I just want to take an opportunity to recognize Dr. Wong and the amazing public health team, and Dr. Steingart and Grace in particular, along with Elena and all the great people that have committed so much work to the success of the CTS site. And I want to start by beginning by reaffirming on behalf of all the members of Waterloo Regional Police Service our full support of the integrated drug strategy, as well as the introduction of a full-time consumption treatment site. We do believe that this is an important tool in the overall approach and a holistic approach and a systems-based approach to the complexity and the complex challenges that all of us face on a regular day. And so I am very proud to be here today on behalf of the members of Waterloo Regional Police Service, but a special recognition to our people that are working consistently with the public health team, Deputy Shirley Hilton, Superintendent Sharon Havel, Inspector Brenna Bond, and Superintendent Eugene Fenton, who have been key leads on the integrated drug strategy file, and particularly have worked very diligently to ensure a strong working relationship with the CTS site and Sanguine overall, not only within the city of Kitchener, but from a region-wide approach. Of course, naturally, these are polarizing and challenging discussions when we look at the issue of addiction and how we actually, as a community, lead through some significant addictions. As Dr. Wong alluded to, this year is a very unfortunate amount of deaths for our community. We're seeing 68 year to date, which has surpassed last year, and it should be a pause for reflection for all of us as citizens and as community leaders, with the notion of that we need to consistently do more to help those in need. Of course, from a policing perspective, we're often in an interesting role when it comes to addiction and consumption treatment sites. On one hand, we have the obligation and a fiduciary duty to ensure the rule of law. But the main focus of policing, and one of our primary notions that's embedded in the Police Services Act, is to preserve life. And hence, we find ourselves very supportive of where we're heading. With the addiction, with the consumption treatment site, and the addition of that in its current location is an interim site, now moving towards a permanent site. We've been very much engaged in the notion of safety and security around the site, and as well as the surrounding neighborhood. Working in partnership with public health and other neighborhood associations in the city of Kitchener, there's been an ongoing working group which continues to gauge how the public feels, what their perceptions are, and also allows us as a police service to bring evidence-based and/or data to the dialogue and discussion. Prior to the site, the interim site opening, we did do a 5-year analytical review to look at call demand, as well as the crime and disorder that was in a sort of a square kilometer radius of the interim site. We fully know that there has been other challenges within that area post the interim site, and as we continue to through this current introduction. And from there on in, every month we have been measuring call demand on our police service, and specifically around the actual interim CTS site. So year to date, from the onset in November 2019, the official kickoff, our police service has responded 22 times to the CTS site specifically. And all of those actual calls for service are a direct request from the members who are working within the site. And I'll explain a little bit of the variety of the calls that we're attending for. One was a property damage with some graffiti that was located there. Those are common neighborhood nuisances that we would see within that particular community and other communities. We've responded 5 times to support the Regional Waterloo paramedics through our tiered response protocol. And that, again, that remains consistent. And through the pandemic, our police services remained consistently supporting paramedics through the pandemic. There's been 4 drug-related calls for service. 3 of those are related to seizures of drugs that have been turned over for destruction. And 1 was related to a complaint of external use outside the building of an illicit drug. Naturally, from time to time, we're dealing with complex individuals with a wide range of challenges who attend the site. And on 3 occasions, we did respond to assist with someone who has been requested to leave the site. So we did request by staff, and we did support staff to ensure a safe removal of the individual. We had 1 theft from the site. That was regional property that was stolen. We've also been there 5 times to check on the overall well-being of an individual. So again, requested by staff to come and support. And that also, we've also had 1 apprehension under the Mental Health Act, again, requested by staff. So in totality, when you look at the demand for service from a police perspective, we have 22 occurrences, which in our view is reasonable. In fact, we would suggest it's low because there's professional medical and public health staff on site who are managing the complexity of the issues and are the best to manage those issues. From a community perspective, we've been continuing to monitor crime and public disorder. The reality is that there has been little fluctuation, whether up or down, over the last 5 years of police service demand in that community. Calls for service remain stable. Where we have seen some exterior or outside that perimeter, some changes, and we've seen a reduction of demand on downtown policing. So generally where we may have had complaints about illicit drug use or public ejection in Halls Lane, at the City of Kitchener washrooms, at the Duke and Benton Street garage, those calls for service have been essentially all but eliminated. And we're seeing that those that were using those locations are now actually going to a healthcare facility for proper consumption treatment services. And so from a public policy perspective, the police service applauds that notion. That's the intent, is to ensure that people can support their addiction safely and with medical support and public health support. The One perception-based, our members do meet monthly, and Constable James Mitchell deserves a significant public shout out for all of his work and connects with many folks on this call. Constable James Mitchell does meet monthly with the community. There continues to be some perception and concern around levels of safety, not significant, but some perceptions that some illicit drug trafficking has moved outside the boundaries, or within several blocks, that those that target the vulnerable are plying their trade as people are making their way to the facility. None of those concerns were called into the service or reported to the service. They come out through community neighborhood discussions, which we appreciate, but it's difficult to action if we don't have insight or an actual call for service. So we've done a lot of education with the community around, please, if you have any concerns, don't wait for James to host a monthly meeting. Call us, contact us. We also think that since March, with the global pandemic, some of those concerns have been heightened. We have had a significant encampment in the area, particularly Height Lane, which has created some community concern, and understandably so. And so some of those perceptions may also be linked to that. But again, from a safety and security perspective, the demand on policing has been minimal. In fact, we would suggest that we're finding a return on investment in CTS site from allowing us to do other police activities and police operations, particularly in the downtown core, where many of these issues were challenging prior to the launch of the interim site. So again, from a policing perspective, we're excited to celebrate the official opening. We extend congratulations to the Sanguine and Public Health team for an amazing job and bringing dignity to a very complex, challenging issue. I would like to, just in conclusion, once again, reaffirm our commitment, our support to the integrated drug strategy, as well as a notion that it is time in society, from a policing perspective, and on behalf of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, we believe that addiction should not be criminalized. It should be treated as a public health model and should be led through a series of public health investment and initiatives versus criminalizing an addiction where the judicial system is not equipped to deal with these challenges. So again, thank you for the opportunity to join you. And once again, a huge congratulations to the many people involved in this, and a huge thank you to the Region of Waterloo for investing significant dollars in this, because it is making a difference in our view on behalf of the police service. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate your support and your words. So one more piece to our formal presentation before we get to your questions. Unfortunately, I think those of you who were part of the launch of the interim site a year ago will recall that we did tours at the end, and you were able to actually go in and see the site, which was wonderful. And unfortunately, this time, due to COVID, as well as the site already being operational in the interim side, we're unable to accommodate that in the same way. But we thought that we would try to film some videos so we could show you a bit about what's inside the site, and we're even going to show you a bit of what's outside the site as well. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to hope that technology will work for me. And I have been told that sometimes there is a delay with videos. So if you're finding that it's choppy, we will make these videos available after until we're able to film something that's a little more formal. So here we go. Sorry. Okay, so hopefully that was we were able to give you an idea of the site. And of course, we would much rather have been able to tour you through, but we'll continue to work on creating a more permanent video of the site once they're all set up and all the features are in place. So now we're at the point in the session where our panelists are available. If any of our attendees want to ask questions, I'd ask our media partners if we could maybe hold till the end. We're going to give you some time at the end to ask your questions. So I'll open it up to the floor, and you can either put the little hand icon up on your screen, or you can raise your hand, and I'll keep scrolling back and forth to see if I see anybody who wants to either make a comment or ask a question.
I think Chair Redmond raised her hand.
Okay, sorry about that, Chair Redmond. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Julie. What an amazing coming together of partnerships. Is it Elena or Alana? I have to tell you, it was very moving what you said. Can you just tell us, are we still using the temporary site, which I know was upstairs? How is that being utilized now that the permanent one's open?
So we're still using the temporary site upstairs. Once the permanent one's open, we'll stop using the temporary site upstairs, and Violet can speak to that better than I can.
So yes, we're using the temporary site until the permanent site is open. And then once the permanent site launches, some renovations will happen to the second floor of the building.
I can just jump in. So when Violet talks about the renovations that will begin on the second floor, if you recall, oh boy, over a year ago, when we talked about the Made in Waterloo Region model, we talked about ensuring that we have lots and lots of program space so that we can bring on site any types of support services, you know, even if it's an ad hoc workshop for folks that might be useful and be meaningful for the clients. In addition to that, we will have some space for people to sit, as well as place for people to shower and some laundry facilities. So that work will begin once we occupy the permanent site on the 14th, and we expect that to be wrapped up within a month or 6 weeks.
Thanks, everyone. Are there any other questions for our panel?
I see some other hands. I'll let
Julie,
you.
you're better at spotting these than I am.
Well, it's okay because you're looking at the faces and I'm looking at the participant list. We're helping each other out.
Amazing.
Yeah, so we have, I think we have
Oh, I
Councillor Gall.
see. Yeah, Councillor Galloway. Sorry. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill. I really don't have a question. It's more of a comment because it's really, this is part of a celebration, really. But I did want to reminisce a little bit because Brian did talk about the integrated drug strategy. And that goes back quite a number of years, as some people will recollect. And it was quite controversial at the time. Of the 98 recommendations that the integrated drug strategy came up with, harm reduction was occupied a few, and those were rather controversial at the time. And in fact, the former chief of police could not support some of that. And kudos to Brian and his staff that since have been able to sign on to that. But the integrated drug strategy, of course, morphed into its own thing, and it's something I think we can all be particularly proud of. But it was kind of the beginnings of the harm reduction process that's brought us to this point in time. Back then, harm reduction was mostly needle exchange and those kinds of things, and we only dreamt about the possibility of a consumption site. They were few and far between, and certainly there have been chiefs of police across the province, even or across the country, even to this day, that are not particularly supportive. So the support of the police was particularly important. But I do also want to acknowledge the City of Kitchener Council, who had a very difficult decision to make, in addition to, of course, Regional Council, to support this. And it wasn't an easy decision, but I think hopefully every member of Kitchener Council now understands and realizes, it sometimes takes courage and foresight to make these difficult decisions, as it did at the Regional Council as well. Because I think what we have today is really a model and something that we can all be very proud of. So I want to thank also Dr. Wong and Grace and Karen Quigley-Hobbs and all the others that have been involved in this, Dr. Steingart from the provider side as well, and all the staff. I think it's something that we can be very, very proud of, and hopefully someday we will be opening a second in the region.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway. I see that Mayor Verbanovic has a question now as well, so it's good segue.
Thanks, thanks, Julie, and more a comment actually than a question. And thanks, Tom, for those comments. Just from a City of Kitchener perspective, I mean, we've been tackling these various issues associated with street level drugs for quite some time. I mean, being the largest urban center in the region, and where many of our social services have been traditionally located, we saw a lot of these issues usually before other places in the region did, and this was no different. And throughout that, over all those decades, the region has been a great partner. Waterloo Regional Police Service has been a great partner as we've worked to tackle these issues. There's no doubt that this was a difficult one and a challenging one that certainly had its proponents, but certainly had some strong naysayers along the way as well. And I was really proud of our council for its support of this. Despite the challenges, and recognizing that at the end of the day, as Dr. Steingart said, these are our neighbors. These are the brothers, sisters, aunts, and uncles of people that we know and people in our community. And at the end of the day, they're human beings who need to be looked after from a medical perspective. And I think this site has demonstrated what can be achieved when we start to look after people in a respectful, meaning, caring way. And so on behalf of the city, I just really wanted to extend my thanks to the entire team at the region, and particularly in public health, to the Sanguine team, but most importantly to those who have been working at the CTS site and those who will work in the future. We've already made a difference through this, and I know it'll continue to make a difference. I think we all hope we get to the day when we don't need these sites, but in the meantime, I also hope, as Councillor Galloway has indicated, that where they are needed, those communities can appreciate how much this type of facility can actually make things better as opposed to make things worse. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a question or a comment from Councillor Ioannidis from City of Kitchener.
Thank you, Ms. Calflesh. Yeah, no doubt, it seems like this has been a tremendous success for the region and for the community. And I guess I really would like to, I guess the Mayor Verbanovic and Councillor Galloway, well, I was going to say Sealock, Councillor Galloway had mentioned, is there any intentions of having a second site in the region?
So who from our team would like to answer that one?
Julie, I can start, and then if anyone else wants to chime in, I'll pause. So back when we did the feasibility study, recall Shuli went over our journey. When we conducted that feasibility study, back then it was identified that there's a need for consumption services really in 2 locations, and that's in alignment with the number of overdoses that we were seeing as per 911 paramedic services calls. And so the first was in downtown Kitchener, and the second was in downtown Cambridge or Galt. So with Kitchener, obviously we're at this moment now, and it's a very exciting moment. With downtown Cambridge, that process continues, and we continue to work closely with our colleagues at the City of Cambridge to support them in what that could look like in that part of our region.
Okay. Thanks for that, Ms. Birmingham. I guess my other question is too, we hope to see one day a good reduction with the services. So is there a way that I guess the region's looking at, like, you know, with the wraparound services and all that stuff, and is there a way to make like this is a permanent site, so one day we would like to maybe make that one portion unpermanent, and is there a way to make the facility more encompassing for other uses later on? Such as counseling, because I think the pandemic and all that stuff has raised some other health concerns.
Yeah.
You want to start with that, Grace?
Yeah, I can start with that, and I just want to make sure that I understand the question. So is the question that, you know, if at some point in the future the need for the consumption component of this service doesn't exist, would we have the ability to pivot and continue the service with all of the wraparound pieces that are currently involved?
Well, yes, yeah, that's pretty well in a nutshell. Yes, thank you.
It's a great question. You know, with the work that we did with Health Canada and getting the exemption in place, as well as the funding through the Ministry of Health, it is in alignment with the consumption and treatment services. So that does include the consumption component as well as the wraparound services. It would be wonderful at some point down the road that, you know, where we wouldn't need that overdose prevention piece. I don't anticipate that happening soon, but there is always an opportunity in the future. If you no longer need an exemption, you can choose to not renew it.
Okay. So anyways,
however, the funding piece would be a question mark.
Okay. Anyways, great work to all your team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We have a question or comment from Councillor Sandy Shantz. Go ahead.
Thank you, and congratulations, and thank you to all of you who have been working so hard on this site. It's a great addition to the region. My question is, or I don't know if it's a question or if I'm just asking for a comment, but you know, one of the big concerns when we were looking at this, and a big concern in Cambridge, is the nature of the people who are going to use the site. And we know that many of the overdoses occur in people's homes. I wonder if anyone would like to comment on sort of who's using, I guess, who's using the site. And I know Chief Larkin indicated that the calls for downtown Kitchener have decreased we assume as a result of this site. So I just wonder if you have any comments on the nature of the people that are using, and how many people who would be using at a residence might be also using the site.
Does so would that be a Grace question or a Violet question?
I wonder if, Violet, would you mind talking about who is using the site now? Not to put you on the spot, but who's using the site now? And if there's another kind of question coming from that, then I can potentially help and chime in.
Sure. I would say there's a fair diversity amongst who's using the site. We have people who are coming in regularly, who are living in the area or staying in the area. We do have people who come from further away, so not within, you know, a few blocks radius of the site, who are coming in to use the site either frequently or occasionally. Part of the services that are offered at the site includes drug testing, take-home naloxone. So often we'll see people who are coming in to get those supplies or to have those conversations in advance of potentially returning home or returning to where they're staying. So there's quite, I think there's a perception of the person or the people who might be using the site, and that's not necessarily accurate from what we've seen within the community itself. It's a fair variety of people.
I'll maybe just add to that, if I can, Violet, that I think no matter where you are, and when you look at overdose risk and the opioid crisis, that it's a real challenge to have folks come to a supervised consumption site. The reality is that the large majority of drug use in the community, whether in communities where there are supervised consumption, takes place outside of these sites. And part of the benefit of having wraparound services in a consumption and treatment services site is, I think, the more opportunity we have to meet other needs that people might present with, the more we're able to have folks come in and use more safely on site rather than home alone or somewhere else out in the community. So it just adds that other layer of importance to us being able to do a good job to put other services within that facility, so that people will come to that facility, recognizing that that most people right now aren't.
Councillor Schatz, does that help answer the question, or do you have other questions? Okay.
I probably have lots of questions, but that takes care of that one. And I guess just to underscore the availability of the site for people across the region in whatever their situation is. And so I hope that people will take advantage of the supports that are in place there.
Thank you so much. We have a couple more hands raised. So Councillor Marsh from Kitchener, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. And I do want to echo the comments made by my colleagues in thanking the region for taking this bold step and creating the consumption and treatment services site, the full-fledged site. I'm looking forward to seeing how your stats grow and change based on usage of the wraparound services. I do want to ask, is there a sense, since we have such a high number of overdoses this year, is there a sense that there's just a growing number of substance use in our region generally? Do we have information about that? Because it is concerning to me, the number of overdoses that we do have already this year. And it seems we are on track to surpass the 2017 highest number. So can you speak to that?
So again, I would look to either Violet or Grace to maybe help start the answer to that.
So I'll start, but I will ask Violet to chime in with what your experience is, Violet, at the site. It's a really good question. And I think there are parts of the question that we suspect we know the answer to, and there's parts of it that we're not sure. You had asked about, is this indicative of more people using? We haven't necessarily seen, and I would, again, ask Violet to kind of speak to this a little bit more. I'm not sure that it's about more people using substances overall, and particularly these harder substances. But what we do suspect is that patterns have changed, and patterns have changed a lot since the global pandemic has hit. That has, there's been multiple factors that have likely come into play. There may not just be one. First and foremost, there's been an unwillingness for many people to go to services. Services have become more restricted, and there's just an overall nervousness about accessing. And so when we see people unwilling to access services and get supports that they need, not just in this site, but in others, and are in their homes more or in places where they're alone more, there is always an increase of fatal overdose if people choose to use alone. I'll pass it over to Violet, because Violet, I know you've had some conversations with folks at the site, and that might provide some greater insight.
So Grace, you're absolutely right about everything that you said. We are also seeing locally, because of the pandemic, because of the closure of services or the decreased hours, lack of travel, people not able to go places, people being asked to shelter in place, much like all of us have been asked to work from home on occasion, or to, stay wherever we need to stay. People were not getting out into the community as much as they would have to access any of the services, including CTS, but, any of the services that are out there. We also know that right now our drug supply is incredibly toxic and unpredictable compared to even where we were 6 months ago. So people who have been using particular substances for many years, in some cases, are not able to get those substances right now, which makes it really difficult and really challenging for people to stay safe. The assumption for a lot of people is, if I'm buying a particular drug, that's the drug that I'm getting, but we know right now that's not true. We've also seen a decrease in the availability of some of the substances that people are normally using, which means they're switching to other substances that they may not have a tolerance to, or they may not have had any previous use experience with, which again creates a situation where people are not able to protect themselves or be as safe as they would normally be out in the community or even at the site. I mean, the number of overdoses we've seen at the site has certainly increased during the pandemic, which is directly attributed to the substances themselves. And, that's a huge challenge for our team, particularly because we don't necessarily know what's in those substances as people are, preparing to use them. So our team has to be ready at all times to respond to whatever's happening. We have very limited awareness in our community of what's in the drugs. So what people are buying is not what they think it is, but we can't even provide the information of what that drug is at this point in time. So it's a huge challenge for people to, to stay healthy and to stay safe when that really big piece of substance use is so unpredictable at this point and so potentially toxic.
So it sounds like in your answer, you are pointing to a real need for safe supply to be a bigger part of our integrated drug strategy. And I'm hopeful that, like the City of Kitchener, the region will take a stronger position on that going forward. I'm not asking for a debate right now, but I would love for us to see more prominent support of of safe supply so that we can address these issues that you're nailing on the head? Thank you.
I think there are two pieces just to clarify. Yes, safe supply is absolutely something that I would support, and I think our community would strongly benefit from. In the meantime, we need access to better drug testing options. So being able to tell people what they're purchasing, what they're bringing in would save more lives than I think I could even imagine, and also keep people healthier in the meantime. So that's something we're working on right now and trying to find a solution to.
Thank you, Violet. Thank you, Councillor Marsh. We have a couple more hands up. So Councillor Jim Erb.
Thanks, Julie. And I was thrown off the system for a few minutes, so if this has been said or asked, I apologize. And first, I want to thank staff for all of the work they did in making this happen. Some of us that attended the public meetings that seemed like years ago, that process was very intense. They handled themselves with the utmost professionalism, responding to questions that were very, very difficult and challenging. And so thank you for making that process.
Is anyone else having trouble with councillors?
And recognizing it.
Okay. We're having trouble with your audio, Councillor Erb.
Okay, so maybe it's at my end.
I think you're good now, so you can go ahead now.
Okay, acknowledging that we're seeing this as a real public health issue, providing a facility that we would provide for any other kind of healthcare facility. And as we move along, we remove the stigma from this, so those who are suffering with the addiction and their families feel welcome, and we can treat this issue in the community. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Erb. I see one more hand up from Scott Davey, so we will pass it over to you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that Councillor Marsh asked the question first, because for those unaware, she brought forward a motion to Kitchener Council that was passed on the safe supply, strongly supported actually on the safe supply question. I'm not sure if it's premature to ask this question, but I would assume that this site would be instrumental in, if that does come down the pipe, in the provision. So has that been looked at all in terms of the management and the provision, if safe supply does ultimately come to our region?
Would that be a Grace, a Chris, or a Violet question?
I'm wondering if I could ask Dr. Steingart to talk a little bit about kind of what that wraparound service model might look like, and whether, or if the safe supply piece would be incorporated.
Yeah. First of all, Safer Supply is programming and a service that I think is critically necessary for the response to the opioid crisis and the overdose risk that people are under. As I said before, that having supervised consumption facilities in a CTS doesn't solve the problem. It's an important part, but we need to do more. And in doing more, part of doing more is providing safer supply. So we are actively engaged in developing that program, finding funding for that programming. And at this point, no decisions have been made about the facilities and the actual mechanisms for delivering that. But that's, again, the beauty of the collaborative processes that we're developing within the city and the Intercity Health Alliance, is that we do have a lot of opportunities just in physical space and our ability to get that kind of service out there to people in the best way that we can once we're able to do that. Whether that's physically at the CTS, whether it's at other fixed locations. We have a primary care bus now that can take healthcare mobily to people where they're at. All of these remain options once we're able to have a full, robust, sustainable, safer supply program operational.
Okay, great. Here's hoping that happens. I just add my voice as well to the support for this site. To Councillor Galloway's comments, yes, it was certainly a complicated decision, but I think in the end it was an easy one. And as someone that was very far away from having an understanding of this, I think really it boils down to the fact that there are really two kinds of people. There are people that are proud of this initiative and support it, and there are those that just really don't understand what it does. So kudos.
Thank you so much for your comments. And that actually is, I don't see any more hands up. So I think we might be at the end of the first part of this session. And again, thank you to everyone for participating and for being here today. It's unfortunate that we weren't able to celebrate this milestone together, but I could feel that excitement through our Zoom call. So I'm glad we were able to bring everybody together in this way, at least, to be able to mark this very important health service in our community. At this point, anyone's welcome to stay. I am going to turn this part over to our media partners to ask questions of our panelists. So I'll ask our panelists to please stick around for a little bit longer. And to anyone else who's going to pop off, we thank you for joining us and we wish you a good Thanksgiving weekend.